Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the most chilling unsolved mysteries and cold cases that have haunted communities for decades. Today's story will send shivers down your spine as we uncover the truth behind one of the most perplexing disappearances in law enforcement history. Picture this: a quiet rural county where nothing ever happens, where the biggest crime might be someone's cattle wandering onto a neighbor's property. But on one fateful night in 2007, two dedicated law enforcement officers vanished without a trace during their routine night shift, leaving behind a mystery that would consume investigators, families, and an entire community for 16 long years. Sheriff Jake Morrison and Deputy Sarah Chen were experienced officers who knew these back roads like the back of their hands. They had patrolled together for years, building trust and developing an almost telepathic partnership that made them one of the most effective teams the department had ever seen. But on March 15, 2007, their radio went silent at exactly 2:47 a.m., and despite extensive search efforts involving federal agencies, bloodhounds, helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers, it was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. The case became a nightmare for their families and colleagues, spawning countless theories ranging from foul play to witness protection gone wrong. Let's set the scene for that mysterious night that changed everything. Sheriff Morrison, a 15-year veteran of the force, had taken the unusual step of joining Deputy Chen on her regular patrol route. This wasn't entirely uncommon, as Morrison was known for staying connected with his officers and the community he served. Chen, meanwhile, was a rising star in the department, known for her meticulous attention to detail and her ability to de-escalate even the most volatile situations. Together, they formed an experienced team that seemed capable of handling any situation that might arise in their peaceful county. The evening started like any other, with the pair conducting routine traffic stops, checking on a few businesses in the downtown area, and responding to a minor domestic disturbance call that was resolved without incident. Their radio chatter with dispatch was normal and professional, giving no indication of any problems or concerns. Weather conditions were clear, and there were no reports of any unusual criminal activity in the area. The last confirmed communication came at 2:47 a.m. when Deputy Chen reported their location as mile marker 23 on Old County Road, a stretch of rural highway that winds through farmland and forest. What happened next remains one of the most puzzling aspects of the entire case. Dispatch attempted to reach them for a routine check-in at 3:15 a.m. but received no response. Multiple attempts were made over the next hour, but their radio remained silent. When backup units were sent to their last known location, they found something that would haunt investigators for years to come. The patrol car was discovered abandoned on the side of the road, engine still running, lights still flashing, and both officers' personal belongings still inside, but no sign of Morrison or Chen anywhere. The immediate response was swift and comprehensive, involving every available resource the county could muster. Within hours, the area was swarming with law enforcement officers from multiple agencies, including state police, federal investigators, and specialized search and rescue teams. The abandoned patrol car was treated as a crime scene and processed meticulously for any clues that might explain what had happened to the two officers. What investigators found only deepened the mystery. There were no signs of a struggle inside or around the vehicle. Both officers' service weapons were still secured in their holsters, which were found in the car, suggesting they hadn't drawn their weapons or expected danger. Their radios were functioning properly, ruling out equipment failure as an explanation for the communication breakdown. Most puzzling of all, there were no footprints or tire tracks in the soft earth around the patrol car that didn't belong to the responding officers. The initial theory was that the officers had been lured away from their vehicle by someone they knew and trusted, or possibly forced away at gunpoint by multiple assailants who were careful not to leave evidence. Investigators interviewed hundreds of people, following up on every lead, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. They examined the officers' personal lives, looking for any enemies, financial troubles, or other problems that might have made them targets. They investigated recent arrests to see if anyone had a grudge against either officer. As days turned into weeks, the search expanded to cover hundreds of square miles of rural terrain. Volunteers joined professional search teams, combing through forests, checking abandoned buildings, and dragging ponds and streams. Despite these exhaustive efforts, not a single trace of the missing officers was found. The case began to take on an almost supernatural quality in the minds of local residents, with some wondering if the officers had encountered something beyond normal human experience. As the investigation stretched into months and then years, the case began to consume the resources and emotional energy of everyone involved. The families of the missing officers never gave up hope, organizing annual searches and keeping the case in the public eye through media interviews and social media campaigns. Morrison's wife and Chen's parents became advocates for missing persons cases, working with other families who had experienced similar tragedies. The law enforcement community rallied around the case, with officers from neighboring counties volunteering their time to follow up on leads and maintain the investigation. Professional bounty hunters and private investigators offered their services, and the case was featured on national television programs dedicated to unsolved mysteries. Despite all these efforts, the years passed without any significant breakthroughs. There were numerous false alarms and dead-end leads that raised hopes only to dash them again. Witnesses came forward claiming to have seen the officers in various locations across the country, but these sightings never led to concrete evidence. Anonymous tips suggested everything from organized crime involvement to government conspiracies, but none of these theories held up under scrutiny. The case file grew thicker with each passing year, filled with investigative reports, witness statements, and expert analyses that seemed to lead nowhere. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this period was watching the families cope with the uncertainty. Unlike cases where bodies are found and families can achieve some form of closure, the complete disappearance of Morrison and Chen left their loved ones in a perpetual state of limbo. They couldn't grieve properly because they couldn't be sure their family members were dead, but they also couldn't move on with their lives because of the constant hope that they might still be alive somewhere. By 2020, the case had officially been designated as cold, though it was never officially closed. A new generation of investigators had taken over the files, bringing fresh eyes and modern forensic techniques to evidence that had been collected years earlier. Detective Maria Santos, who had joined the department just a year after the disappearance, made it her personal mission to solve the case that had defined her department for over a decade. Santos began by re-examining every piece of evidence with new technology that hadn't been available during the initial investigation. DNA analysis techniques had advanced significantly, and digital forensic capabilities could now extract information from electronic devices that previous investigators couldn't access. She also began conducting new interviews with witnesses who might have remembered additional details after years of reflection. The breakthrough began with something seemingly insignificant, a property dispute between two neighboring farmers that had been brewing for decades. During the research for this civil matter, county records revealed discrepancies in property boundaries that had never been properly resolved. This discovery led Santos to examine historical maps and land surveys of the area where the officers had disappeared, revealing details about the terrain that hadn't been considered during the original investigation. One particular area of interest was an old homestead that had been abandoned since the 1940s. The property had changed hands multiple times over the years, and its exact boundaries had become unclear due to poor record-keeping and the passage of time. More importantly, the original search teams had been denied access to this property by the owner at the time, who claimed it was too dangerous due to unstable structures and potential environmental hazards. In March 2023, exactly 16 years after the disappearance, Detective Santos finally obtained a comprehensive search warrant for the abandoned homestead property. The current property owner, who had inherited the land from a deceased relative, was cooperative and eager to help with the investigation. What the search team discovered on that property would finally provide answers to the questions that had haunted the community for over a decade and a half. Hidden behind overgrown vegetation and partially collapsed outbuildings, investigators found the remnants of an old outhouse that had been constructed sometime in the early 1900s. The structure was in an advanced state of decay, but something about it caught the attention of one of the search team members. The ground around the outhouse appeared to have been disturbed at some point, and there were traces of what looked like concrete or cement that seemed out of place for such an old structure. When investigators began carefully excavating the area around the outhouse, they made a discovery that would send shockwaves through the law enforcement community and finally provide closure for two families who had waited 16 years for answers. Buried beneath several feet of soil and debris, they found personal effects that were immediately recognizable as belonging to Sheriff Morrison and Deputy Chen. The discovery included Morrison's distinctive watch, which had been a retirement gift from his previous department, and Chen's academy graduation ring, which she had never removed since earning it. Further excavation revealed the full scope of what had happened on that night in 2007. The physical evidence told a story of violence and premeditation that investigators had suspected but had never been able to prove. The location of the burial site, hidden on private property that had been off-limits to searchers, explained why 16 years of extensive searches had failed to locate any trace of the missing officers. The discovery at the old outhouse was just the beginning of unraveling the full truth behind the disappearance of Sheriff Morrison and Deputy Chen. As investigators processed the crime scene and analyzed the evidence, a complex picture began to emerge of what had really happened on that March night in 2007. The case, which had baffled investigators for over a decade and a half, finally began to make sense as pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Forensic analysis of the burial site revealed that the officers had been killed elsewhere and their bodies transported to the remote location. The careful concealment of the gravesite indicated that whoever was responsible had intimate knowledge of the property and had planned the disposal of evidence meticulously. This suggested that the crime wasn't a random act of violence, but rather a calculated murder that had been planned in advance. The property where the bodies were found had a complicated ownership history that investigators had to carefully trace through decades of records. The land had been passed down through several generations of the same family, with various relatives holding title at different times. During the period when the officers disappeared, the property had been under the control of someone who investigators now realized had been a person of interest in the original investigation, but had never been thoroughly examined as a suspect. DNA. Evidence recovered from the burial site finally provided the definitive proof that investigators needed to identify the perpetrator. Advanced forensic techniques that hadn't been available in 2007 were able to extract genetic material from evidence that had been preserved in the case files for 16 years. When this DNA was run through national databases, it produced a match that connected the murders to an individual who had been living in the area at the time of the disappearance. The arrest of the suspect in the Morrison-Chen murders came as a shock to many in the community who had known the individual for years. The perpetrator was someone who had been hiding in plain sight, living a seemingly normal life while carrying the secret of what had happened to the two officers. The arrest brought a mixture of relief and anger from the families and community, members who had spent 16 years wondering what had happened to their loved ones and protectors. During the interrogation process, investigators were finally able to piece together the events of that fateful night in March 2007. The suspect had lured the officers to a remote location under false pretenses, possibly claiming to have information about a crime or requesting assistance with an emergency. Once the officers were isolated and vulnerable, they were ambushed and killed, then transported to the burial site where they would remain hidden for 16 years. The motive for the murders was complex and involved a combination of factors including ongoing legal troubles, a deep-seated hatred of law enforcement, and concerns about being caught for other crimes. The suspect had been involved in various illegal activities over the years and had apparently believed that Morrison and Chen were getting too close to uncovering evidence that would have led to significant criminal charges. The resolution of the case brought a sense of closure to the families of the murdered officers, though it also brought the painful confirmation that their loved ones were never coming home. The community that had been haunted by the mystery for 16 years could finally begin to heal, knowing that justice would be served and that the person responsible for stealing two lives would be held accountable for their actions. The case of Sheriff Jake Morrison and Deputy Sarah Chen serves as a stark reminder of the dangers that law enforcement officers face every day in service to their communities. These two dedicated public servants were killed simply for doing their jobs, trying to protect and serve the people they had sworn to defend. Their disappearance left a hole in their community that can never truly be filled, but their memory lives on in the work of the officers who continue to patrol the same roads they once traveled. The 16-year journey to solve this case also demonstrates the importance of never giving up on seeking justice for victims and their families. Detective Maria Santos and the other investigators who worked tirelessly to solve this cold case showed that with persistence, new technology, and a commitment to truth, even the most challenging mysteries can eventually be unraveled. Their dedication ensured that Morrison and Chen did not die in vain, and that their killer would not escape justice. For the families of the murdered officers, the discovery of the truth brought both relief and renewed grief. While they finally had answers to the questions that had tormented them for 16 years, they also had to confront the reality that their loved ones were gone forever. The community that had supported them throughout their ordeal continued to stand by them as they processed this final chapter in their long journey toward closure. This case will undoubtedly be studied by law enforcement agencies and criminal justice professionals for years to come, serving as an example of how cold cases can be solved with modern investigative techniques and unwavering determination. It also serves as a tribute to all the men and women in law enforcement who put their lives on the line every day, often facing dangers they cannot predict or prepare for. As we remember Sheriff Morrison and Deputy Chen today, we honor not just their sacrifice but their service to a community that never forgot them. Their story reminds us that behind every badge is a human being with family, friends, and dreams, and that the cost of keeping our communities safe is sometimes paid with the ultimate price. May their memory continue to inspire others to serve with the same dedication and courage they showed throughout their careers. Thank you for watching today's video. If you found this story compelling, please like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries and true crime cases. Remember to hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest content. In the comments below, let us know what other cases you'd like us to investigate. Until next time, stay safe and never stop seeking the truth.